Over the next 75 minutes, you're going to hear from these four gentlemen running for the Republican nomination for governor May 16th. With us tonight, Eric Deters, State Auditor Mike Harmon, Somerset Mayor Alan Keck, State Agriculture Commissioner Ryan Quarles. Again, gentlemen, thank you for being here. I want to let you all know we invited all 12 candidates running for the nomination to the debates here this week. You heard from 3 other candidates last night. The rest did not confirm their participation. So, we appreciate your time here tonight. A reminder of some of the rules your campaigns agreed to tonight. Each candidate will have 60 seconds for opening statements, 60 seconds each to respond to a series of questions. If a candidate mentions you in their response, you have the option to ask for 30 seconds for a rebuttal. Then we'll end with a minute to close, 60 seconds to close. 35. You're sorry, guys. It's going to beat back you. I'm going to yell at you. It's fine. So tonight, you'll get some questions from me. You'll get some questions from Shane, who you've already heard from, who's the party chairman for the Kenton County Republicans, and Mark Payne, the government and politics reporter for Lake Northern Kentucky. For those of us here in the audience, again, I'm so glad to see so many of you here. Friendly reminder again to silence your cell phones at this time, take out your candy, unwrap it, at least that's what we were always told in church. And hold your applause until the very end of our debate tonight. We would appreciate it. Keep things moving. We've got a lot of questions and a lot of guys on this stage tonight. So, let's get to it. We are going to start with 60-second opening statements. I'm going to go long and start with candidate Quarles.
Well, thank you and good evening, Northern Kentucky. My name is Ryan Quarles. I'm your current Commissioner of Agriculture and running to be your next governor. I may not have grown up in Northern Kentucky, but my mom is from here. She grew up in Boone County, class of 1970, and my great-grandfather operated a speakeasy in downtown Covington during Prohibition. So my family's been fighting federal government overreach for almost a century now in Northern Kentucky. I'm running to help unite our state. You know, this is an area of Kentucky that has had rapid growth, but due to Andy Beshear's lockdowns, we needed a leader. I sued the governor and kept over 500 family-owned Kentucky Proud businesses open despite his lockdowns. We need to have a governor that believes in the business community. I'm pro-life, a defender of the Second Amendment, and I will support our men and women in law enforcement. We need to focus on our workforce needs in Northern Kentucky as well as education. I may not have been born in Northern Kentucky, but my roots run deep here, and I'm glad to be here. Let's elect a governor who cares about Northern Kentucky.
Candidate Keck.
Look, I'm so excited to be here. This is an awesome opportunity for all of us to share our ideas, our values, the opportunities we see for Kentucky. My name's Alan Keck. I serve as the mayor of Somerset, Kentucky. What a tremendous blessing it is to get to lead and serve my hometown. I'm a Christian, I'm a family man, and I'm a businessman. I took the skills that I learned as a CEO in the private sector and I took them to Main Street, Kentucky. You know, my hometown of Somerset was a community that was still and stagnant. In many ways, it was no different than the Commonwealth that we all love. You know, this amazing place with fantastic people who wasn't reaching its potential. Now Somerset has been on a rocket ship just like this area. Economic development abounds and we're starting to reach our potential. I'm running for governor because I'm sick of being in last place. I'm sick of losing to our neighbors to the north and the south, and I believe that our best days are ahead. We're not going to get there by tearing each other down. We're going to get there by starting to build each other up and starting to push for the stars. We can do that in Kentucky, and I'm excited to be a part of it.
You think I have as much TV as I watch. There's a clicker. Candidate Harmon.
Hi, I'm Mike Harmon, your Kentucky State Auditor and candidate for governor. You know, since I've been auditor, we've been kind of like the fellow that did the quarter root pillow. We've been making headlines. Sorry about that. Had to get a joke in. But no, seriously, this is a very important race. You know, everyone in this race, I consider them all my friends, but I have the most experience of all of them. I had 13 years in Kentucky House prior to becoming auditor. I've had 8+ years as auditor. I've been endorsed by the Kentucky Right to Life. I've been endorsed by the Northern Kentucky Right to Life, and I've been endorsed by Kentucky Heritage Forum. But even with all that experience, I'd say this. I'm not a polished politician, but if you want someone who loves the Lord, loves his family, and loves this country, and in that order, I hope you'll think of me, Mike Harmon. If you want someone who's fought for your freedoms, your liberties, your conservative values for 20+ years, I hope you think of me, Mike Harmon. Please go to MikeHarmon.com. Thank you.
Candidate Deters.
Thank you for hosting this. It's an honor to be here, and I'm excited about being here. And the reason why I'm excited about being here is the opportunity to share with you at home and in the audience here about what I plan to do and why I'm running for governor. I'm running for governor for one reason. I am representing the disenchanted people out there across the state of Kentucky where I have traveled that are upset about too much government. My motto, less government, more freedom. I'm the only candidate running who is pro-Trump 100%. I'm the only one supporting Trump who is sitting on the stage tonight. I'm the only one sitting on this stage tonight who bashes Mitch McConnell. I'm the only one on this stage who meets a payroll, knows what that's like. My whole reason for running is fighting for the people out there who are suffering. Kentucky ranks last in too many categories. It's time to change that. You know how you change it? Do something different. Vote for Eric Deters for governor.
All right, gentlemen, our first series of questions tonight is a series of hand raises, if you'll indulge us. Each of you are Republicans. You have similar beliefs on many things that are important to Republican voters. So let's set a baseline. Raise your hand if you consider yourself pro-life. Raise your hand if you consider yourself pro-Second Amendment. Raise your hand if your faith impacts your belief. Raise your hand if you're in favor of lower taxes. Raise your hand if you don't like Washington liberals. So now we've got a baseline, got that out of our system, let's dig into a few things and some of these will come back up. We want to know what makes you unique and discuss some policies and issues that are facing Northern Kentucky and the Commonwealth as a whole. We're going to start the questioning with Mark.
Thanks, Evan, and thanks for joining us this evening, gentlemen. My first question. For a variety of reasons, Northern Kentucky often feels disconnected from Frankfort. How are you earning the votes of Northern Kentuckians specifically?
Keep going down the line, candidate Keck, you've got the first answer.
Well, I start by showing up a lot. I get asked all the time, why are you in Northern Kentucky so much? First of all, let me thank you for local media. I think local media is critical, not just in Kentucky, but in America, because we have lost trust in the national media. And I think it's imperative that we have local sources that we know, that we see at church, we see at the grocery store, at Kroger, we can talk to. So thank you for that. But I care a lot about Northern Kentucky because, look, it's an engine for our economy. You know, this is one of the few areas that's rapidly growing, and I think folks up here feel disenfranchised because more of their money stays in Frankfort than comes back home. You know, I talk about real policy. When we talk about tax reform, everybody loves to talk about Tennessee. But what politicians won't tell you is that the conversation goes beyond just the income tax. There's local control in Tennessee. Nashville is thriving because a lot of the money that is spent in Nashville stays there. You know, I have said publicly that I think we need an opportunity for the economic engines to keep some of what they generate, and if that happens, imagine what Northern Kentucky would be doing.
Candidate Harmon.
Yeah, I mean, Northern Kentucky is important. It's important to me now, and it was important to me when I was in Kentucky General Assembly. You know, I'm from Central Kentucky, and when I represented Central Kentucky, but I was always an honorary member of the Northern Kentucky caucus because I always voted against tolls. You know, they always felt like that was important. And, you know, and seriously, from a standpoint of what we did when we were there, when I was there, we worked on multiple, like, tax credits for Northern Kentucky, specific some of the projects. I sat on tourism, development, and energy, so I'm very familiar with some of the things that are important to Northern Kentucky. And, you know, to be honest with you, this is not unique. And when I travel to the east, the people in the east believe they're forgotten. When I travel to the west, the people in the west believe they're forgotten. And our next governor needs to make sure that we do not forget any part of the state. We need to cherish every part, and we need to help every part develop economically and otherwise. Thank you.
Candidate Deters.
I want to give you some straight talk, as I always do. We've heard it before. Everybody who lives in Northern Kentucky has heard it before. They come, they make promises, they speak, they lead, nothing happens. They fill cabinet positions filled with Lexingtonians and Jefferson Counties, which is okay. Northern Kentucky, we've heard it before, red-headed stepchild of the state of Kentucky. We've been ignored. This is the most amazing, successful region in the state because where it's located near Cincinnati. The bottom line is, it is past time for Northern Kentucky to elect a governor. And you know why we haven't had a governor since Goebbels, 1900, shot, assassinated, lived 4 days and died? It's because there hasn't been anyone from Northern Kentucky until this candidacy where there was a Northern Kentuckian who could connect with average Jane and Joe Kentuckians, rank and file across the state. And I'm doing that. So I want to be your Kentucky governor and Northern Kentucky governor.
Kenton, Quarles.
Well, given the fact that my mom grew up here and my grandmother lived out the rest of her days in Walton, Road, I've been coming to Northern Kentucky literally my entire life. I think I'm connecting with the voters because we're running an old-fashioned grassroots People's First campaign across all corners of the Commonwealth. I've been up here a lot during this campaign. We're proud to have the endorsement of over 230 elected Republicans from all across Kentucky, including Northern Kentucky as well. And I've been connecting with the rural parts for the past 8 years. There are rural parts of all three Northern Kentucky counties that I've been working with farm to table, with agritourism events, etc. And so I've been there for this region as your ag commissioner, and I'm going to be there for you as your governor as well. And I want to be the governor that puts emphasis on fixing every pothole on I-75 and I-71 coming into Northern Kentucky. It's time for the taxpayer money that this area generates to come back to Northern Kentucky.
All right, Mark, you got another question.
COVID highlighted a growing childcare crisis across our country and Commonwealth. Governor Beshear's proposed universal pre-K as a solution, which many in the industry oppose, as it could force the closure of many private providers. What are your proposals to fix the broken childcare system?
Yeah,
Move on that line. Yeah, Kenton.
Is it me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, well, first off, let's not do what Governor Beshear did and shut down and minimize so many of our daycare providers during COVID. That hurt a lot of our daycare providers. Secondly, I'm not in favor of universal pre-K, but from the standpoint of helping out individuals that are wanting to go to work, one of the things that I have been supporting when it comes to some government assistance, the TANF program, and that helps and allows individuals who want to go to work, but make sure that they actually have access to child care, because a person's child is one of the most important things to them, as they should be. So we need to work with individuals. We need to make sure there's as many as we can, and we need to have good business-friendly laws in place and regulations in place to incentivize that.
Kenton, Deters.
I'm uniquely qualified to answer this question because I have been talking for a year now with daycare, childcare operators across the state. The law firm which I'm associated with has actually filed some lawsuits relating to it. And the bureaucracy and the nightmare and the mess that Kentucky Department of Health and Human Resources lays on these daycare operators is unbelievable. And I agree with my friend Mike Harmon. He shut them down. We shouldn't have shut them down. They were essential. You need daycare operators so you can go to work. It was outrageous. I also agree with Mike on the whole issue that pre-K is not the solution. We don't need more public education in the face of this movement of school choice, which I also support. Let the daycare operators alone. Cut the regulations. They can't even get a phone call or an email response from Andy Beshear's bureaucratic mess in Frankfurt. That's the fact.
Kenton, Quarles.
Let's not forget that Andy Beshear was the shutdown governor. He shut down Main Street, Kentucky, let the big box stores stay open. That wasn't fair. He shut down our schools much longer than necessary. Now our test scores statewide have plummeted. And of course, he violated our rights as Americans when he ordered troopers to our church on Easter Sunday just 3 years ago. And he also shut down daycares, making it harder for people to return to work, whether they are essential or non-essential, etc. And let's not forget that nearly half of Kentucky's $14 billion budget goes towards education. And so for those school districts that choose to go forward with that, there's been historically high funding that have been returned from Frankfurt to these school districts. But I think we need to engage our faith-based community as well. I'm a follower of Christ. I'm proud that our church provides resources for those, especially with young kids as well. And I think that we need a governor that works with our faith-based community instead of shuns them.
Kenton, Keck.
Yeah, my answer is going to be a lot different here. I'm going to go all the way back to COVID when child care facilities were shut down, and they can correct me if I'm wrong, but I was the only one advocating early for them to be reopened. We were actually offering, as the city of Somerset, to put in the thermometers, the digital readings to allow child care operators to get back open quickly. I do support pre-K education because the data supports it. Money spent on kids ages 3 to 5 produces better life outcomes. That doesn't mean that I want further bureaucracy, but I also think it's a gateway to school choice. You see, the left has told us a lie that we can't support public school teachers and school choice, and I say, why not? But also, I think it's a lie that we can't be for pre-K because it's some Democrat idea. I don't believe in that at all. I think it's a pathway, in fact, for us to allow the dollar to follow the student, even if it's a percentage, because I think what we would all agree on is that the Democrats aren't going to allow, nor should we, shut down these private preschools. We need to empower them, allow them to be a part of the solution as we get to Kentucky Kids Center.
Gentlemen, thank you. Shane, you're up.
We've heard a lot about what Andy Beshear did not do well during COVID. What did Andy Beshear do well during COVID? And you can't say nothing.
Kenton and Deters, start with you.
With all due respect, Shane, I'm going to say nothing. And, when I think about and I'm somebody that believes that the alleged pandemic was overblown. I'm somebody who fought for healthcare workers up here at St. Louis Medical Center for 2 years for free, fighting for the religious exemptions, the exemptions for healthcare. What they did, what our community did, what our St. Louis Medical Center did to the healthcare workers was awful. And Andy Beshear was right there with them, locking down, mandating the vaccines. And it was awful, and it was wrong. This choosing who gets to stay open and who doesn't get to stay open was awful. I think Andy Beshear violated our constitutional rights across the board. Lockdown. We need more country hoedowns and less lockdowns, as I put in my video. So I don't think, I'm sorry, Shane, I can't answer nothing because I don't think he did anything well.
Kenton and Quarles.
I think it's a very short list. One thing, when he decided to shut down our schools, I've been so focused on food insecurity in Kentucky that I couldn't help but reach out and get our schools turned into areas that could, for kids and anybody get a hot meal to pick up a hot meal. Andy Beshear shut down our economy unfairly for much too long. And so Kentucky actually became the first state in the country to get a critical waiver to the USDA so that we could help hungry kids get meals. And that was leadership from my office that required his signature as well. But look, I disagree with the economic harm he's done to us, the plummeting test scores from our K-12, and I was the one who sued him to keep Kentucky open. I was the first candidate in the Republican field to sue the governor to keep businesses open. And for me, you have a candidate who has a spine, someone who's going to challenge, and someone that does not back away from the challenge.
Something else I'm going to do is answer questions. It's easy for all of us to have some element of revisionist history, right? We want to relive it. The NCAA tournament was shut down. I think all of us at that point in a state that bleeds blue, red, or whatever other color, we knew it was really, really serious. Here's 2 things he did well. He communicated early, and he showed he cared. And after about a month of that, I think all of us were really, really, really sick of it. He continued to stick to that plan instead of what good leaders do is adapt. We had new data come out. When COVID first hit, we were told, President Trump included, that 3 to 5% of us were going to die. It was really, really serious. And so once we learned that that wasn't the case, we adapted. I was the first. We built a coalition of mayors on April the 20th to launch reopening plans for chiropractic, optometry, and dental care before anybody. And we did it in a practical way. We didn't yell, kick, and scream. We submitted plans for reopening, and that ended up happening.
Harmon.
Shane, I'm going to have to agree with Eric here. I don't know of anything that he did well. I mean, he shut down our businesses. He focused, as I've been traveling the state talking about it, he focused on fear over freedom. He focused on fear over freedom when he shut down our businesses. He focused on fear over freedom when after he shut down our businesses, he shut down the in-person unemployment offices. I mean, think about it. Our office showed we had well over 400,000 emails that were sent to the unemployment assistance line they just ignored. And finally, he focused on fear over freedom, as was mentioned earlier, that he shut down our churches. He tried to tell us how to worship our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and he sent the state police out to enforce it. So we need a governor. Our next governor needs to be someone that's going to focus on freedom over fear, not fear over freedom like our current governor. It's so important that we have someone that is going to protect our liberties, that's going to protect our freedoms, and Governor Beshear was not it.
Mark, we're back to you.
Coal is a Kentucky signature industry. but the industry is shifting to embrace renewables like nuclear, solar, wind, and hydroelectric. How should Kentucky balance the decline of traditional fossil fuels and the growth of renewables?
We're back to Kenton. Well, first off, God bless Kentucky with a lot of natural resources, including coal, natural gas, big 12 million acres of timber, and of course, agriculture that is second to none in our nation. And so we need to get government out of the way. First off, we need to support the coal industry, but I support an all of the above approach when it comes to lowering the cost of energy. That means lowering the cost of your utility bills, but also the cost of doing business in Kentucky. I also have a track record of pushing back against President Obama's and Biden's EPA when it comes to getting what we think are power seizures from the EPA on Kentucky farmland with Lotus. I've got a background and track record of getting government out of the way. Let's do this. And of course, in northern Kentucky, you have a large airport. Let's make Kentucky the sustainable aviation fuel capital of the United States. You can make aviation fuel out of 100% soybean-based derivatives. Let's connect agriculture with a thriving aviation community in Kentucky.
Okay. We absolutely have to leverage the resources that we have. We are so blessed with coal, natural gas, oil, and then of course our waterways. And that might not be necessarily relevant for energy at the moment, but it's an asset that we have that so many states don't, which will allow us to lead into the future. I'm a supporter of taking a deeper look into nuclear. If you look at the states that surround us, we're getting left behind yet again. You know, it's a theme that I'm candidly sick of and why I'm in this race, is that Kentucky's always losing. You know, I'm a proud Kentuckian. I know if you're watching tonight, you are as well. But we're 44th to 48th in almost every measurable category. We know that nuclear done properly can be safe, can be reliable, and it can be affordable. Why would we then not take a lead? Well, let me tell you why. Because we always want to look backwards. We always want to say, well, what if? And coal's going to be important. We need to make sure we leverage it. I'm from East Kentucky, but the decline is real. We need to get the coal that we can, but we also need to look for ways to advance ourselves into the future.
Yeah, when I first entered the House in 2002, or was late 2002 and 2003, coal provided 94% of Kentucky's power. Now, a lot of that has changed. Part of it has changed because of the competitive nature of natural gas, but unfortunately, a lot of it has changed due to the regulations that's coming out of the federal government. We need to be in all of the above energy, but it needs to be based on competition. I mean, this country was based on competition. We should not force one type of energy out based on, non-competition. So I'm very supportive of coal. I'm very supportive of all of it. And as mentioned earlier, I think it's important for us to look at other options. So many people who have talked about the quote-unquote dangers of fossil fuels, which I disagree with, but they're against nuclear as well. And if carbon is your god, then nuclear is the best solution to it because it produces none.
As the only candidate sitting on this stage with mountain roots, Harmon County, Kentucky, coal country, Black Mountain, I can tell you, and I want to make sure everybody in Kentucky knows, that I will fight, defend, and support Kentucky's coal industry as hard as I can. It needs to be defended. You know where you're elected? You're basically electing a governor. Is he going to be strong and tough enough to stand up to the federal government? I will be. As far as nuclear energy, I've been touting nuclear energy forever. Nuclear energy is clean energy. It will create jobs. It's safe. I'll go ahead on the record tonight, because this is an issue that I've got a lot of questions about. I'm not really keen on these solar farms. I'd rather Kentucky farms be used for farming and agriculture rather than ugly solar panels. But the bottom line is, this global warming attack that we're getting from the globalists hits Kentucky hard, and we need somebody strong to stand up to them, and I will.
Shane, we're back to you.
As Republicans over the last few years, we've made a lot out of the term woke, cancel culture, environmental, social governance. How are your views different than your Republican opponents on these issues?
Well, I'll start by saying I don't use buzzwords just because they poll well. You know, Republicans tried that last year. 70% of our country said that we were going in the wrong direction, and what happened nationally? We got our butts kicked again. I'm ready for common sense and a do something approach. It's why we've been so successful in mayor, is I don't worry about tearing other people down. You mentioned you were the ringmaster. We're in the midst of a race where the top two candidates per se are beating the hell out of each other. And is that really going to help our state? Is that going to help a state that has 48th in median income, 48th in fiscal policy, fiscal stability? The answer is no. And so we can talk about woke because consultants tell us it's great. Yeah, cancel culture is real. I don't believe in it. I believe in second and third chances. I don't think you say something to make a mistake, you should be destitute for the rest of your life. But I'm talking about real solutions. You mentioned childcare earlier. We had a plan on childcare on day one. Our entire vision has been out there for Kentucky to succeed the day I filed. Alan Keck cares about results and solutions.
Harmon?
Yeah, when we were in the debate in Louisville, they asked us to define woke. And I said, it's more about indoctrination and cancellation, and that's really what it's about. But for those who, they ask how we differ, well, with my 13 years of experience at Kentucky House, I was fighting woke before fighting woke was actually even a popular thing, or maybe even before woke was a terminology. But it's one of the things that we have to fight against. We need to make sure that people succeed, and we need to look at people as people, look at their heart, look at what they do, look at their character and the content of their character. And we need to make sure that our education reflects that. We need to make sure that we get back to educating, not indoctrinating, and we need to make sure that we provide options for our kids so that every child can succeed to their highest level, not just some arbitrary floor.
Kenton, Deters?
Well, I'm completely different than everybody else running for governor, also sitting on this stage on this issue, because I speak up and speak out every single day on this. I'm with you. All that laundry list, what they're doing in our schools, what they're doing relative to the drag queens in the schools, what they're doing with gender mutilation, what they're trying to do, on every single issue, the indoctrination, all of it. We need a strong governor that will fight back and stand up for it. Not a moderate. You're hearing some moderate comments up here. We don't need moderation when it comes to defending our children. And in fact, I support the death penalty for anyone who sexually abuses a child or physically abuses that child so bad ends up in the hospital. We have to protect our children, and we have to be strong in doing it. And I think that's the whole woke thing is about indoctrination, like Mike said.
Quarles?
Somewhere along the way, society had invented cancel culture. I think it's very toxic for us to make one mistake in life, and as Alan said, you're vilified. I think that we're all human. I think it's so important that when it comes to our schools, that we get back to the basics. We're not just competing against Texas or New York, we're competing against India and Japan. That we need to have quality education that focuses on preparing our students for life skills. That includes everything for being prepared for vocational trade, higher education, or even balancing your checkbook. So that's what I would do as governor, is get our Kentucky Department of Education focused on returning to the basics as well. When it comes to ESGs, I'll work with the General Assembly or sign an executive order that would forbid our pensions from investing in companies with ESG focus as well. And finally, I'm a big believer in religious freedom. We can protect those who have religious objections of things that are being unfortunately taught in the classroom.
Mark?
Northern Kentucky is the economic engine of the Commonwealth and the state's second most populated region. Our unemployment rate is the lowest in the state, and our labor force participation rate is the highest. What is your plan to continue that momentum and keep our state and region competitive?
Well, I think in any region of Kentucky, we need to put a focus, and of course, I appreciate the governor promoting the low unemployment rates, but unfortunately, what he doesn't like to talk about is the low labor participation rate. And we need to help every part of Kentucky succeed in getting that labor participation rate up. One of the things that I've suggested, I've talked to so many people that feel trapped because when it comes to government assistance, Medicaid specifically, people are so terrified that they're going to lose their Medicaid. I've suggested allowing people to stay on Medicaid for a while and pay a percentage of their salary above poverty so that they can stay on there, give that incentive to work and make that percentage such a level that eventually it makes more sense for them to go back into the private sector with it. That is just one of many things that we can do to promote not only Northern Kentucky, but the entire state of Kentucky.
Deters.
It's really about access and communication and willingness to do something. Northern Kentucky needs a governor, and I would be a governor from Northern Kentucky, where people in Northern Kentucky, businesses, schools, organizations, would have quick access to the power and the authority for the state government and all the bureaucracies to get things done. It's that simple. The government wields a lot of power with a lot of departments. Sure, there's plenty of things that he has to work with the legislature on. I personally am for less government, more freedom, which means tax and regulatory cuts would be an economic boom across the state, including Northern Kentucky. But I sat down with Chris Knuckleman a couple years ago, and he admitted, Kenton County Judge Executive, that it sure would be nice to get more from Frankfurt. Because everybody knows we don't. It's across the board how we get left out. Everything gets left out. Northern Kentucky does. Under me, that will not happen. You'll be able to text me, and I'll respond.
Quarles.
I have several ideas that would help out the growing economy of Northern Kentucky. Number one, we need to stop paying people to sit at home and watch Netflix. Only 56% of Kentuckians who are healthy, able-bodied, of adult age are actually working. We got to get them back to work. Number two, there's a housing shortage in Northern Kentucky. We need to make sure that we have a balance of this. We see this in Scott County, where I'm from, as well, and Lexus plant is from as well. We need to have emphasis and investment on infrastructure. Again, fix I-71, I-75 as well, but also make sure that the Cincinnati Airport, which was built on my great-parents' farm, has the adequate resources they need as well to make sure that with employers like Amazon, making sure that we are the best of the best, including sustainable aviation fuel. And finally, we need to make sure that our tax code is competitive. You'll have to compete with Ohio across the river. That's something unique that a lot of cities don't have to do. Let's make sure that our tax code is as pro-business and pro-family as possible.
Keck.
Again, I can speak to this from a position of experience as a businessman, a CEO, and a mayor. I know what it's like to get things done at a local level. This starts for Northern Kentucky with local control, allowing more resources to stay in this community. The second thing is getting creative on reentry. The effective unemployment in this area is zero, you know that. There are more jobs than there are people willing to work. We proposed again on day one sliding scale benefit reform, allowing us to take care of the working poor instead of those unwilling to work. But we want to grow and expand programs and organizations like the Life Learning Center that are helping people go from recovery to redemption and getting those that are most desperate for a job and a second chance that place of employment. We've done that in Somerset as well, where we're training people in the jails. They leave with not just a job, but a career. And then finally, understanding again as an executive what it's like, because I've dealt with it as mayor. Challenges like infrastructure, public safety, which we haven't talked about yet, economic development, and dealing with the legislative body. I've tackled all those things as mayor, and we'll do the exact same thing as governor.
Harmon. You start? Yeah, you sorry.
Blank answer again.
Shane, how about your turn?
Kentucky is known for having some of the strongest laws protecting citizens' rights to own and possess firearms and limiting access to abortions. What additional laws would you sign, and what proposed laws would you veto relating to guns and abortion?
I know where I'm going now. Deters.
Well, first off, I am 1,000% in defending Kentuckians' gun rights. I would veto red flag laws. I would veto restrictions on those. I tell you what I would not veto. I would not veto laws that would allow no more gun-free zones, so law-abiding citizens could carry guns. I'm the only one with the courage to ask the question after the Louisville shooting, is this: did that bank have a policy against their employees having guns? You know, that's how we protect ourselves. Law-abiding people with guns. As far as the pro-life issue, I am pro-life. I would veto any extension of abortion in the state of Kentucky, and I would sign every pro-life bill that hit my desk that the legislature passed.
I'm a defender of the Second Amendment. It's there for personal protection, it's there for hunting, Just yesterday, we raised $250,000 for our food banks for the shotgun shoot. Especially when it comes to youth sports, I would help encourage folks to learn gun safety at a young age, just like I did through 4-H. I've had an A rating with the NRA. I've been endorsed previously as a legislator multiple times by the NRA, and I'm against red flag laws because it's a violation of due process as us as Americans and protections we have in our Constitution. When it comes to abortion, I would protect and defend the trigger law that Kentucky recently passed. I know there's a lot of lawsuits that are yet to come, but we need to talk about reforming our broken adoption and foster care system in Kentucky. I'm the only candidate really talking about this. We have 8,000 kids looking for a forever home. And so as governor, we need to support our crisis pregnancy centers as well as reform our broken adoption and foster care system.
Candidate Keck.
For so many Americans, the Second Amendment is the most cherished one, and I think the reason is, without that amendment, then so many of the others would go away. You know, our right to liberty and freedom of religion and free speech. And so we're going to fight with all that we can to protect that. I do believe there has to be extended discussion on mental health and the crisis that we have in America. We're overprescribed, we're overdepressed, we're struggling in so many ways. And so I think we need to get the folks that need help. Nobody should ever have to leave our Commonwealth to get the help that they need. And effectively, if you're allowed to send somebody to get the help that they need, they're not going to be a threat to themselves or society. As it regards to life, I'm just thankful that I'm a part of the party where the only disparity might be in the instance of violent sin or violent crime. You know, if you look at the other side, they're talking about late birth abortion, partial birth abortion, or full term. You know, this is not a party of that. This is a party that celebrates and promotes life, and we're going to continue to advocate for it.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. I always received NRA rating of A. I've always encouraged the use of the training of Eddie Eagle. As a matter of fact, it's kind of funny, we passed a few years ago the constitutional carry in Kentucky, but I actually carried that bill all the way back in 2010. Unfortunately, I was always in the minority, so we were not able to advance that. In regards to the pro-life issue was one of the things that got me involved in politics in the very first place. As was mentioned earlier, I'm endorsed by the Kentucky Right to Life. I'm endorsed by the Northern Kentucky Right to Life. I support the law as it is on the books now, that the only exception is protect the mother's life in case it's in danger. And really for me, only in the event that you can't save both of those individuals, because it is a life.
Jay.
Let's get philosophical for a second. The founders of our country chose to establish a representative democracy over direct democracy. Modern populism is calling for the governed to be more involved and have more sway and input. As an elected leader, how do you balance your personal convictions versus those of the constituents you represent?
Let's start with Kenton.
Thank you for that question. Number one, I'm a firm believer in the Constitution, both the United States Constitution and, of course, the most recent reiteration of Kentucky's Constitution, which was written in 1891. So modifications along the way. So number one, I want to follow what the Constitution says. I think that we have so many issues that could be resolved. Instead of running to the nearest courtroom to sue people like the governor does, he's suing me on the state fair right now. How about we take a hard look at what's in our Constitution, our guiding light, both at the national level and state level as well. Secondly, I grew up on a farm working. I was so fortunate to have a mom who's a public school teacher and a dad that continues the farm today. They taught me the difference of right and wrong at a young age, and so I want to follow what's right for Kentucky. It's important for us to look at the text, believe in the Constitution, and do what's right for the Commonwealth.
I believe government closest to the people is best. That's why I ran for mayor in the first place. I think the most representative form of government is closer to home. I believe in home rule, and I believe in states' rights. I believe in the 10th Amendment. I believe that Washington is incredibly broken, and it's going to stay that way. I don't think that we need 535 people and the unelected bureaucrats that come from whatever presidential administration happens to rule our lives. I think that we're elected to, yes, represent them, but they choose us to make decisions on their behalf. I was proud to be reelected by almost 20 points as mayor because we were successful in doing that. And I want to bring that same type of leadership to Kentucky. Candidly, I'm sick of being told what to do from Washington. I'm sick of waiting every 4 years for a Messiah president to come and say this. Look, Kentuckians are better than that. I don't really care about the next presidential election until we solve this one, because Kentuckians deserve better. We don't need to wait for that white knight. We need to pick ourselves up from our bootstraps and start getting things done at home.
Harmon.
Yeah, I think it was Benjamin Franklin that they asked, what type of government do we have? And I think he said it was a republic if we can keep it. So that's important to keep in mind. During the debate when they were removing some of the powers of the governor just recently, they asked me, if you're a governor, do you care that they removed it? And I was like, no, we don't need a king. We need a governor. We do not need a king. When I was first elected to the state house, I was elected to the state house. Was first Republican from Boyle in 102 years. And part of that was because the state, well, for me, is because you treat everybody with respect. The area was only 25% registered Republican, but you treat everybody with respect. But here's the thing, I love being in the state house because the state house is the representative that is closest to the people other than your local government. When I was elected state auditor, I was the first Republican elected state auditor since 1967. So it's important for the people's voice to be heard.
Kenton, Deters.
I have a history degree, I have a law degree. I only have a minute to answer this question because I could quote the Constitution. Populism, led in this country now by Donald Trump and the Republican Party, is not a risk of causing harm to our democratic republic. What has happened in our democratic republic is the Democrats and the Republicans who have held office in this state and in this country have let the people down. And the people are angry and they're mad. They're fed up with career politicians. They're fed up with Mitch McConnell and what he does with Joe Biden. And then comes down the bridge and then does things in Lincoln Day dinners blaming Joe Biden for the spending. People do not trust politicians and they shouldn't. That's why populism is on the rise. Donald Trump is the leader. I embrace it. You know what? We just have to have different leaders in our democratic republic that listen to the people.
Mark, you got the next question.
Thanks, Evan. During the 2022 legislative session, the House released its budget ahead of the governor, a first in Kentucky history. The move symbolized the legislature's growing power compared to the executive branch. Would you try to pull some of this power back to the executive branch if elected governor?
Candidate Keck.
Well, I don't view public service as a position of power, and so I would frame it a lot differently than that. We'd have a conversation long before any of it went public. I think a good leader is going to listen to those that serve alongside of them. President Reagan was famous when he was negotiating with Gorbachev. He said, we'll get so much more done when we talk to each other instead of about each other. Part of the reason we're in the struggle that we're in is because of this grab of power. People like the attention and the celebritization of public officials. I think we need to push back against that. This needs to be public service. We actually need to take a hard look at those that are seeking public office. Are they doing better in public office than they were doing in the private sector? Do they want self-preservation because they want to stay in government, or they're there to serve the people? So my plan, my hope would be, I'll work alongside the General Assembly leadership and both members of the General Assembly that aren't in leadership to make sure that I hear their concerns as well, like the representatives from Northern Kentucky that were kicked off committees, and come to a consensus before we release anything.
Well, on the first item about the General Assembly doing the budget, I thought that was a great idea because, you've got a new governor coming in. Now, I know it was a different time, but a new governor coming in, and you're basically going to have, 45 days to get a cabinet, get a budget. So I think it's very good that they work. Now, as for, them seizing power, as I mentioned earlier, I think it's good. We should have a governor, not a king. And one of the things I've always said, with 13 years in the Kentucky General Assembly, I've worked with these individuals. We need a governor that's going to be able to work with the General Assembly, not fight with the General Assembly. I've jokingly said that since I've been auditor, we've been able to pass 12 to 13 good pieces of legislation to help government be efficient, effective, and ethical. I tell people I passed a whole lot more legislation as auditor than I did in 13 years in the minority as a state rep.
Candidate Deters.
First off, I think it's really important that you understand that it's just a reality that the Republican legislature has this power. And what I'm hearing on the campaign circuit is Republican legislators are fed up with Andy Beshear taking credit for all these wonderful things that have happened due to the Republican legislature. That's what's going on. It's the Republican legislature. Now, do I agree with everything a Republican legislature does? No. Here's what I would do. First day on the job, even before I got on the job, I'd call in the Senate Majority Leader, the House Majority Leader, and I'd sit down and say, okay, here's what I want. What do you want? What can we definitely agree on? What can we reach an agreement on maybe? And what are we never going to agree on? Start at the top of the list and work my way down. Let's face it, the governor and the legislature has to work together. And I think having a Republican governor, and I'm the best one to be Andy Beshear, would be wonderful for this state.
Candidate Quarles.
With over 90 vetoes, a historic high, lawsuits consistently going after the legislators right now and other executive branch officers, we need a governor that's going to work with the General Assembly and not fight the General Assembly every single day. Governor Beshear has zero relevance with the Kentucky legislature right now, and he proves it every single session. Ever since John Y. Brown was governor, the legislature has grown in independence. I believe, as a former legislator myself, in co-equal branches of government. And so I'm going to work with the General Assembly. Imagine the day when a governor and those in legislative leadership sit down, not in January, but in October, prior to a session, and say, what do we want to do for Kentucky? What are the top 3 or 5 issues that we want to do? Instead of battling it out publicly, let's get it done by working together. And as Ag Commissioner, that's the type of consensus leadership that I brought to the table.
We're back to Mark.
With the defeat of former state representative Sal Santoro in 2022, the chairmanship of the powerful Transportation Budget Review Subcommittee went to a legislator from rural southern Kentucky. How will you assure that Northern Kentucky receives adequate support on Kentucky 536, the 4th Street Bridge, and the Brent Spence Bridge project?
Candidate Harmon, we'll start with you.
Sure. Well, I mean, in general, the General Assembly makes the determination on who's going to be, chair of those particular committees. But I think just like anything else, it's important for us to put a strong focus on helping every part of the state. But certainly those are priorities to Northern Kentucky, and it's important for us to sit down. Just as you mentioned earlier, it's important for us to sit down with the leadership in each of the communities, figure out what is the most important thing to them. Work not only with the local leaders, but also work with the General Assembly. And that's another thing that we've talked about, that you've got to have a governor that's going to help maintain those same focuses. And just as I mentioned when I was in the House, even though I was from Central Kentucky, I worked with a lot of Northern Kentucky legislators to see what their priorities were, so we could work to try to get those through as well.
Candidate Deters.
The voters spoke. Sal Santoro lost. It's the way it is. I'm not going to belittle the people of that district who voted the way they did. They chose a different path. And the fact that it went to another committee member isn't going to make any difference if the governor of Governor Kentucky is from Northern Kentucky. So if I'm elected governor, it changes the whole ballgame. It's different than anybody else sitting on the stage. I drive these roads that you just mentioned, 536, the Brent. I drive them every day. I'm thoroughly familiar with the roads. I gotta ask all the developers, all of the communities out there in Northern Kentucky, ask yourself this question. How cool would it be to be able to call, text, and email your governor from Northern Kentucky and have input on our roads, the bridges, everything dealing with transportation, and have somebody that has a Department of Transportation that could talk to the member of that committee and get things done for Northern Kentucky? It'd be beautiful.
Candidate Quarles.
We have some great new freshman members of the Kentucky General Assembly. I've worked with all of them this past session to pass multiple bills. And so I want to make sure that every single representative and state senator has their fair say when it comes to the road plan, which is over $1 billion each year. And as for the chairman from Southern Kentucky, I had dinner with him just last night down in Wayne County. It's had a great working relationship that's already pre-existing when it comes to making sure our priorities are met. But here are some things. Let's have a transportation and let's say Kentucky budget that's based off funding needs and merits and not giant check presentations. Let's make it so the governor cannot use this as a re-election fund. which I predict is going to happen this fall, maybe this year around the state. And finally, I want to be the first governor in modern history that takes their name off of every entry and exit point on our interstates and our airports as well. It's a waste of taxpayer money.
Okay.
As a business person, you understand that you invest in the things that bear the most fruit, that produce the greatest returns. We know that Northern Kentucky is an economic engine. And so often in government, we hear about chopping up a finite pie. How can I get my sliver? How can East Kentucky get this part, West Kentucky, Central Kentucky, and now we're talking about Northern Kentucky. Well, you do it by growing that pie. And if we invest in Northern Kentucky, this engine, then the rural parts of the state that are fighting for their fair share are going to have a larger share. Look, this is economics. We need a common sense, business sense of urgency brought to the governor's office. We've tried the political path for far too long. We've tried business as usual for far too long, and that's why so many of the roads that are being referenced are dilapidated. Let's try a new way. Let's put a businessman back in office, but a businessman who's going to treat everybody with respect.
Shane, we're back to you.
President Trump's election paved the way for a record-setting conservative court system and overdue tax reform. His time in office also concluded with controversy around his election, 2 impeachments, and ongoing legal challenges. What lessons from Trump's time in office will you take into the Kentucky executive branch?
Candidate Deters, you're up.
Well, first off, I stand with Trump on all of that. Trump was unfairly impeached. January 6th was much ado about nothing. They're political prisoners. They did steal the election in 2020 by mail-in ballots, through vote harvesting, ballot harvesting, through the suppression of information about Hunter Biden on Twitter. We know it all. Now we know, it's chaos. The Biden family is a political gangster family, and our national media suppressed it. I would not change anything. I want Donald Trump to be reelected president in 2024. The one thing that I would do different than President Trump, and I always point this out, my difference is, I'm not a billionaire. I'm just a millionaire. So I'm not pretentious. I don't need a gold toilet. I don't live the lifestyle that Donald Trump has. And I have probably a little softer side than he does on dealing. I'm not going to do mean tweets. But the bottom line is, I'll defend Trump today, tomorrow, and next week.
Candidate Quarles.
Donald Trump brought in a big swath of America that felt forgotten about. I'm proud of Kentucky, visit all 120 counties. President Trump brought in a lot of folks that otherwise felt disenchanted. So I think it's a lesson learned to make sure you listen to the people. I've met with him multiple times. He's appointed me on a couple of task forces, including rural infrastructure across America. But I think some of the lasting legacies is a revived court system. He also challenged the DC establishment. Also, I think that it's important to look back at what he did for the economy as well for the COVID lockdowns, that our economy was restored. We had record low unemployment across the way. And so one thing that I would like to bring to the governor's office was his one-stop shop approach. When it comes to businesses looking for permitting or moving to Kentucky, we're going to provide you a shepherd so you can navigate the labyrinth of Frankfort, Kentucky, just like he did in DC.
Candidate Keck.
Yeah, I think the business sense of urgency is something that we'll all agree on. Our economy was booming. Interest rates were less than half of what they are today. And by and large, America was more free and more prosperous. I think we also, though, need to learn from these lessons. We saw it in Governor Bevin and in President Trump, is that if you refuse to build consensus and relationships, then that opportunity for leadership becomes finite. You can be a truth teller and be blunt, and also treat people with respect and dignity. You know, the lessons for me come from Scripture. The good Lord said to love our neighbor. That didn't come with asterisks or special consideration. It just said, love your fellow man. I can also be bottom line up front and very, very blunt and candid and treating people with respect. I love everybody. I love all Kentuckians, and I also know how to get things done. Those lessons aren't mutually exclusive, and that's how I've led. That's how we'll continue to lead.
Candidate Harmon.
Yeah, Trump was an exceptional president. Many of the things you mentioned, I mean, we had $2 gasoline, we got wonderful Supreme Court, we got, low inflation, we got great lower courts, and of course, I'm the only one sitting at this table that has a hat signed by Donald Trump that says, "Keep auditing great." So, and I've got a photo if y'all want to see it, but no, I'm just kidding. From the standpoint, the only other thing well, there's more things, but one of the things we also learned is we need to make sure that we have bigger fonts on his teleprompter, because when he introduced me, when he was here at Kentucky, he said, "Auditor Mark Harmon," instead of Auditor Mike Harmon. But no, really, I mean, from the standpoint, one of the things we do, as mentioned, we won't have mean tweets. We want to make sure that we treat people appropriately, but do so and still stand up for what is right. And we can do both. We can do both.
Shane, we're back to you.
In 2019, Governor Bevin lost Kenton and Campbell counties, and his vote total decline from 2015 to 2019 in Boone County was substantial. What is your plan to appeal to suburban Republicans that were turned off by his rhetoric?
Candidate Quarles, back to you.
Well, first off, I have 8 years running the second largest executive branch agency in Kentucky, only second to the governor's office itself. I've been working with these suburban populations all over Kentucky, whether it's farmers markets, getting more local food to our school systems. We have more schools, 1,000 schools now serving local food. These issues I know resonate in suburban areas as well. I've also been a leader on reducing food insecurity and hunger in Kentucky. And so these are things that I think that are appealing. I'm also a candidate that's making sure that we travel to all corners of the Commonwealth as well. I'm proud that I get in my big red truck and we travel the Commonwealth and we listen first. And so I believe that if I'm the nominee, I can run the score up on Andy Beshear like none of the other candidates can because of my rural roots. So we need that in a candidate. We need to select the one who has the best chance of winning.
Candidate Keck.
Specific to the suburban voters that you mentioned, the swing with Bevin in 4 years, I think we bring 3 things to the table that they appreciate. The first is radical authenticity and transparency. I don't use those buzzwords because, again, people tell me to. We're finding ways to bring people together while still being honest, authentic, and transparent. The second thing is my executive experience. It's very unique. The only one in the field who's been a CEO in the private sector and a CEO of one of the largest municipal governments in Kentucky. They like that common sense approach. They like the fruit of our results. They like the fruit of our past. I don't have to tell folks what we might do or what we think we'll do. We can show them what we've done. Like back in the blue when the world said to defund the police. Like growing an economy when the world said that, Eastern Kentucky and small town Kentucky is stale and stagnant. The final thing is the vision. The Keck game plan has been out there since November for the world to see. I think these voters appreciate that level of forethought and that level of vision that they can take a look at, and they know we can execute.
Well, and once again, Bevin was much like Trump, Bevin was a wonderful governor. I mean, he was the first governor to fully push for the fully funding of the pension arcs, both teachers and others. But unfortunately, he took the time to attack teachers, which was sad, and he should have defended with facts. And that's what we have to do as Republicans. We have to defend with facts. We can't defend with name calling. And as for myself, as was mentioned earlier, when I was first elected to the state house, I was elected there, there was only 25% registered Republican. When I was elected auditor, it was still predominantly Democrat in Kentucky before things started changing. But you know what? I got reelected as in the state house every time because even though it was very Democrat, because I treated people with respect. And there was a poll done in 2012 that showed that even though I'm extremely conservative, 11% of self-professed liberals voted for me because I treated people with respect.
Candidate Deters.
I think how you win a vote is by caring. And how do you care? You communicate, you listen, you treat them with respect. I give out my cell phone number, 859-250-2527, to every Kentuckian. I respond to every single text. I've heard from everybody across the state of Kentucky. You know what I've learned? Teachers aren't all Democrats. A lot of them are Republicans, and they care about their pension. You know what else? Union workers. There's a lot of Republican union workers, and they care about their union jobs. I am the candidate who is running for office of governor of Kentucky, who is proving during the campaign by communicating, listening, giving out his personal cell phone number, which I'll continue to do as governor of Kentucky. That's how I win people over. No one cares about you more than I do, and I've proven it with my entire life.
Mark, back to you.
Northern Kentucky legislators introduced legislation in the 2023 session to do away with certificate of need, which particularly impacts Northern Kentucky. What are your thoughts on certificate of need, and would you reform it or get rid of it?
Candidate Keck, you're up.
Well, I'm going to start by saying that I always support competition. I think that that's especially true and necessary in healthcare, but we also need that competition to be fair. I know here, St. E provides an incredible amount of service. They do it across the gamut of healthcare. So what isn't fair is allowing new competition to come in and not offer those same services. But I also don't believe in monopolies. And so I do think that there is some nuance that's necessary to certificate of need. And I'm going to support and advocate for anything that allows competition as long as that competition is fair. Specific to healthcare, though, I think we need an all-of-the-above approach. Kentucky is one of the worst states in America with it. I think 44th in healthcare outcomes. We lead America in diabetes and cardiovascular issues. You know, we need, and we launched this in Somerset called the Healthy Somerset Initiative, but a holistic approach. Mind, body, spirit. Our physical body, our spiritual health, and our mental health. And I think that will help alleviate the challenges that we face in healthcare overall.
Candidate Harmon.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the certificate of need, and it's interesting, when I was up here speaking in Boone County, I had spoken to a couple of legislators that are actually very supportive of eliminating the certificate of need. And I do understand the concerns with that as well. From a standpoint, much as was mentioned, I'm very much a believer in competition. I also believe in a level playing field. So I think it's something that we can't just throw out one answer right now. I think we do need to sit down with our legislators. We do need to sit down with our local officials, our healthcare providers, and find out what is the best to provide that competition without also shutting down existing hospitals and other healthcare providers.
For you listeners, certificate of need means Kentucky has this very complicated process to allow competition. You have to show need, and those that are already there get to fight it. So anybody that tries to come in like Christ Hospital gets fought by St. Elizabeth Medical Center and their political power. I know all about it. I was the first one to speak up against it. I'm for eliminating certificate of need. You know what the argument is? Wait a minute. We can provide cheaper, and these services are better, and we can reduce costs. It's a bunch of baloney. Prices go up. You have a monopoly. We have healthcare monopoly in Northern Kentucky, and it is not good for Northern Kentucky. And the same thing around the entire state. We need to eliminate it and allow competition. Anybody who took Economics 101 in class knows competition brings down prices and increases better services.
Candidate Quarles.
COVID changed everything. It changed our economy, it changed telemedicine, it changed telework conditions as well. And as we unfortunately have to come back from these lockdowns, and let's not forget that our healthcare heroes who we praised at one point may have lost their job for refusing a mandatory vaccine, which I'm against. We need to make sure we reevaluate all systems. So one thing I get out of me as a candidate, I want to tell you if I'm as well versed on the issue as I should be. And secondly, I'm going to appoint in cabinet people that are a lot smarter than I am on these particular issues. But I have studied certificate of need some in Northern Kentucky. I'm open to review that, but I also think it's important that we work together to find common sense. I also think, speaking of healthcare, for those of you in rural Kentucky at home, we have an access to healthcare issue in rural parts of the state, and let's focus on mental health issues as well. I'm open to reforming certificate of need.
All right, we have time for one more question. How about that?
How about that?
Mark.
I'll take it, Evan. The legislature passed a bill in 2022 that would place a charter school pilot in Northern Kentucky. But with Northern Kentucky University choosing on passing on being an authorizer, it leaves the school in doubt. What are your thoughts on charter schools, and how would you move forward with the school in Northern Kentucky?
Kenton, Harmon, you're up.
Yeah, of course, I've always been very supportive of charter schools. I think anything that well, school choice in general. And I think anything that we can do to provide additional competition, as was mentioned earlier, is important. Now, years ago, I had a local KEA president asked me why I was for school choice, and I explained, when you have that particular competition and choices, parents who choose, even if they choose to stay in a traditional public school, our satisfaction level goes up. But she looked me right in the eye and said, "But Mike, if you let parents choose, they would never choose a school." And the sad thing was, I knew that school. I knew she was wrong. I knew those teachers had worked so hard in that public school to get it back to where it needed to be. I also knew that the parents had gone in and worked so hard to get it back to where it needed to be. But the fact that a teacher in that system felt like they were putting out a subpar product, but it broke my heart primarily for the students, but it broke my heart for the teachers and for those parents as well.
I can't believe I left out our governor during the quote-unquote COVID, what he did to our schools. It was awful. You've had children who've had a year, 2 years, lost education. I believe in charter schools. I believe in education any way we can do it well. I support homeschooling. I support school choice. Here's a shocker for you. I support strong, solid public schools with teachers who are paid well. Because guess what? We have a teacher shortage. And part of it is because what's going on in the classroom that has to stop, and also pay. So I'm for all of the above when it comes to education. I'm for less bureaucracy in education. I'm for eliminating, I can't because I'm going to be governor, not president, I can't eliminate federal Department of Education. I completely disagree with Ms. Kraft wanting to do away with the Kentucky Department of Education. Now she says she just wants to reform it.
Northern Kentucky is known for many different educational outcomes and choices as well, from Kentucky Catholic to our public school systems as well. As an education guy myself, I have a doctorate in education. I'm the son of an educator. She spent 30 years in the classroom. I think it's important that we give Kentucky options, especially in Northern Kentucky and our friends in Louisville as well that are begging for different choices when it comes to their kids' education as well. Bashir vetoed many of these initiatives that were passed by our General Assembly, being led by members of the Northern Kentucky delegation as well. I also believe that parents should have a say-so what their kids are exposed to in the classroom, that we should support our teachers. They're trying to teach, they're trying to raise up people's kids as well. I support discipline reform in the classroom so that teachers can take control of the learning environment. And for someone who grew up on a farm, I support vocational and trade programs, and also support our strong homeschooling community across Kentucky.
Keck.
Kentucky is one of 6 states in America that doesn't have charter schools or school vouchers. It's yet another example where we allow politics to allow us to go further and further behind. And who suffers? Our kids. It's why we have generational poverty. We can keep doing things the exact same way, or we can start to reform and change course. When we launched the Keck game plan, we talked a lot about education. We talk about supporting our public schools, but also school choice, which I do. We talk about having student support personnel in the classroom, where our teachers have help in the classroom dealing with behavioral health and mental health challenges. We talk about making student teaching a paid internship. And then finally, we start talking about stop teaching to the test. If you listen to teachers and you listen to the men and women who care deeply about our kids, these are the things they're telling you. These aren't my ideas, they're theirs. So let's listen, let's make these reforms, let's support school choice and charter schools. Let's absolutely do it here across our Commonwealth.
Gentlemen, give you a couple seconds to collect your thoughts for your closing statements. In the meantime, while they're doing that, let's thank our questioners tonight. Appreciate that. So Mike started the last question. Candidate Deters, you are up first with your closing statement.
How much time?
A minute.
Okay. I have 1 minute, so I just want to encourage you to go to DetersForGovernor.com or Deters for Governor on my Facebook page. You can check everything out. I also want to just say why I am different than everyone else running for governor. I have a background in law, business, real estate, communications, and media. I'm also one of the oldest. I am tougher than pine knot. I am strong. You want a fighter, I'm that fighter. I'm the only one who supports Trump, top to bottom. I'm the only one that is speaking out against Mitch McConnell and the Deters. I'm against corruption. I'm against political gangsters, what we have. We need a new way of doing things. Less government, more freedom. I'm for complete tax overhaul of this state. We need that. I'm for protecting our children. But you know what? More than anything else, I care. I communicate. I will listen to you. Wouldn't it be great to have a governor who cares that much? It'll be a totally different way of governing that you've never seen. This is your one chance to do it. Deters for governor. Thank you.
Kenton and Quarles.
Voters of Kentucky, in less than 3 weeks, you get the opportunity to select a Republican nominee to take on Andy this year. And I challenge you to nominate the person who has the best chance of beating him this fall. Back in 2019, I won 117 of 120 counties. I got more votes on election night in 2019 than Andy this year did. I'm out there earning the votes every single day. Vote for someone who's putting the effort in, 70 plus hours a week right now, in addition to running the Department of Agriculture. I want to help out Northern Kentucky with workforce development, our housing shortage. I'm focused on Kentucky issues in this race. I also think we should look at our 9th and 10th Amendment options when it comes to what we can do to decouple ourselves from Washington, D.C., depending on the issue. But tonight, I'm running a positive campaign. I'm proud of what we've done, and it's important that we fix I-71 and I-75. And as a lifelong Reds and Bengals fans, I'm with you.
Kenton and Keck.
My name's Alan Keck. I'm the mayor of Somerset. I'm a Christian, I'm a husband, I'm a father. I've led my community, the community that I love and cherish. I want the opportunity. I'm asking for your consideration to lead the Commonwealth we love. I'm sick of the rest of America laughing at us, scoffing at us, telling us that we're poor and dumb and that we're unhealthy. I'm sick of being 48 and almost everything that's important to us. The Kentucky I see is so rich in potential, and we need a leader who's going to uncover it. The Kentucky I see is 40,000 square miles of natural beauty and immense God-given natural resources. We're the state of the Ford truck, the Camry, the Corvette. We're the state of Amazon. And we're the state of UPS. Look, this is a special, special place. If you're watching tonight, you know that. I think you can see the difference in somebody that's looking for another job, looking for an opportunity to enrich themselves, and somebody who cares deeply about you, our Commonwealth, and our future. I'm asking for your consideration again. My name's Alan Keck. Please go to keckforkentucky.com. Take a look at our vision.
Kenton and Harmon.
Yes, and I'd ask you to go to my website, mikeharmon.com, and check us out. When I first decided to run for governor, people ask why. Because you've got the most experience than anybody here, but why would you want to run for governor? I tell them the truth. I'm a Christian, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a grandfather. And I want my kids and my grandkids, someday if I'm blessed enough, my great-grandkids, to live in a state and a nation. They can accomplish anything. I mean anything. But unfortunately, our current government has put such a focus of fear over freedom instead of freedom over fear. But I want to leave you with this. We've got 12 people in this primary. Any one of them would be better than our current governor. But I encourage everybody, the good book tells us that iron sharpens iron. The good book also tells us that a house divided cannot stand. So when this primary is over, we've all got to come together. We've all got to come together because we've got one goal, and that goal is to make Andy Beshear one-term governor. That has to be our goal.
It's like y'all have done this before. Gentlemen, I thank you for your time, your discussion, your responses to our questions. Thank you for being here, whether you're a local guy or you drove in. I really appreciate it. I mean that. I really appreciate you being here. The same goes for you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your engagement in the process and for all that you have done. For those of you watching, same as well. Thanks for streaming us wherever you may be watching us. We appreciate you. We can't end tonight without thanking the Kenton County Republican Party, our partner in this, WCPO9, Link Northern Kentucky, and the Northern Kentucky Community Action Commission for our use of this space. To all the candidates, good luck in the home stretch ahead of May 16th. It's coming faster than you think. I'm Evan Millward. It's been my honor to be here tonight. Thank you. Get home safe. Good night.